Okay, so in 3.2, we are going to have some similar steps than what we had in 3.1. Okay, so when you are finding roots or solutions, you are going to be finding the x-intercept. Okay, we also did that in the last chapter too with linear functions. So wherever it crosses the x-axis, that is your solution. And then sometimes we can't find exact roots. They might be irrational numbers, so decimals. And when we do that, we can estimate solutions, and we're going to do that today by using a table. Okay, so if you have two solutions, you're going to see the parabola crosses the x-axis twice. So here's an example of it crossing the x-axis twice. If you have one solution, the vertex is on the x-axis, so it only hits the x-axis one time. And then if there are no solutions, then it does not cross the x-axis. So it's either going to be above the x-axis and it opens up, or it could be below the x-axis and open down. So in example 1, when you are using that graph to determine the solutions, all you have to do are find the x-intercepts. So can you guys do that for 1A? Can you just label what your x-intercepts are based on your given graph? Okay, so again, your solutions are the x-intercepts. All right, so your x-intercepts are -1 right here. And then this would be out to 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are going to be your two solutions. Okay, so x equals -1 or x equals 4. Or you can just put a comma in between is fine. Okay, but you have to have those two values, -1 and 4. All right, for B, it says that we are going to solve by graphing. So anytime we have to solve by graphing, we are using those steps for finding the middle of the graph. Okay, and then you do have to plot your points, and then you'll find your x-intercept. So hopefully we remember from the other day to find the center, we do the opposite of B over 2A. So we're going to do the opposite of 2 over 2 times 1. -2 divided by 2 is -1. So that is going to be the x-coordinate of your vertex. So we just like to put that in the center. Okay, that way we get something symmetric. And I like to go one up and then another one. Okay, and then we can go one down and then another one. And then we're going to see if this makes a nice parabola. We want to make sure that we do span our graph. So on your next quiz, part of your test is going to be calculator and part is going to be no calculator. I'm going to show you guys how to use the table feature on your graphing calculator today. So if you have that with you, we're going to plug this into y equals. Okay, if you don't have it with you, you can still use plugging in for x to solve for y. Okay, so if you want to use your table feature, what you're going to plug into your graphing calculator is x squared plus 2x plus 1. So I'm going to go to y equals. I'm going to clear those out. Okay, so we're going to do x squared plus 2x plus 1. Okay, now, hopefully we notice above the graph it says table. So if you go to second and then hit the graph button, it's going to give you your table. We've already found the center. Okay, so we can see at -1, it's going to be 0. Okay, and I'm just going to write down the table on your graphing calc. And to get there, you just hit the second and then the graph button. Should be above that. All right, so at -1, we're at 0. At 0, we're at 1. That's easily verifiable because we know that's our C value. At 1, I'm at 4, and then you can see they're symmetric. Okay, I also am going to add on there this at 2, it's at 9, because that's going to fit on my graph, and that's just going to give me a more accurate graph here. Okay, so now we can plot those points. So -1, 0, 0, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And remember that you have this line of symmetry here. So wherever your line of symmetry is, if you go 3 units to the right, you can go 3 units to the left to make your parabola. Okay, and you do want to span whatever grid you are given. And then if you're going to solve by graphing, all you have to do is find the x-intercept. In this case, the x-intercept is the vertex. Okay, so your x value is -1. Remember that you can have 1 solution, 2 solutions, or no solutions. So if it didn't cross the x-axis, you would write no solution. And then if it crossed in 2 places, like we did up here, you would write both of those solutions. Okay, so you have all of those cases. All right. Now, for example 2, notice it says we have to use a quadratic equation, which means we are going to have to write an equation for this problem. Okay, and then you are going to find 2 real numbers that have a sum of 4 and a product of -96. So a sum of 4, a product of -96. Okay, so we're going to create an equation and solve it for 0. So you can pick a variable. I'm going to use x. Okay, we're going to let x equal 1 of the numbers because it says 2 real numbers. Okay, real numbers are just any number you can think of. Next week we're going to learn about imaginary numbers. And then it'll make more sense. So they're always saying, oh, they have to be real. Okay, so we're going to let x equal 1 of the numbers. Okay, since the sum is 4, okay, the other number can be written as and we're going to come up with this together, okay? So if you know that the sum is going to be 4, okay? If I told you one of the numbers is 3, you'd know that the other one is what? 1. If I told you one of the numbers was 2, you'd know the other one is 2, okay? So what's a way that I could use 3 to find that the other one's 1? If the sum is 4. Yeah, you could do 4 minus 3 to get 1. You can do 4 minus 2 to get 2. Well, if it's x, then to find the other one, we just have to do 4 minus x. So that's what we're going to call it. Okay, so since the sum is 4, the other number can be written as 4 minus x. okay? Because if you were to add 4 minus x to x, what would that equal? 4, okay? That's why we're able to do that. Okay, now the other thing that we know is that the product is equal to 96. Okay, so if the product is equal to negative 96, I can write this as x times 4 minus x. Those are my two values. So x times 4 minus x is equal to negative 96. Okay, so if x is a number, 4 minus x is the other number, because when I add them I get 4. The product is negative 96, so I'm multiplying x and 4 minus x to get negative 96, and then we are going to multiply this out. Okay, so if we multiply that, let's see what we get. What are we going to do on this side? Yep, let's distribute. So x times 4 is 4x. X times x would be negative x squared, because that's a minus. Okay, so when we're creating the equation, it says here we want to solve it for 0. So we want to have it equal to 0. You can really move it to either side. What I would do is I would move over the x squared. I'd add it to this side, and I'd subtract the 4x. That way I have a positive value. Okay, so you have on this side 0 equals x squared minus 4x minus 96, and that is going to be your quadratic equation. Okay, and they said use a quadratic equation, so that's what we're doing. So this is your quad equation. Okay, I'm just abbreviating here. Okay, so there are a couple different ways that you could find this solution. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to use the table on your graphing calculator to find the x-intercept. Okay, so again, we are looking for the x-intercept values. Okay, you could also graph this and find the x-intercepts. That would be fine. So we're going to start by plugging in our equation. X squared minus 4x minus 96. Okay, so you're going to plug that in. So our y1 is x squared minus 4x minus 96. And then if you're trying to find the x-intercepts on the table, can you guys tell me what you're looking for when you go to the table? How do you know which one is an x-intercept? When y is 0, exactly. So for the x-intercepts, you have to find where y is equal to 0. Okay, and again, you're using that second button, the graph button, because above the graph it says table. Okay, so we can scroll in either direction. Oh, I found one. Okay, so I'm just, for your notes, I'm going to draw out the table so you understand what you're trying to find. So at negative 8, you get 0. Okay, we know the product is what? What's the product of the two numbers? Okay, the product is negative 96. So if you do negative 96 divided by negative 8, what do you get? 12. So that's where your other one should be. Okay, so you can use that and verify, right? So those two values. Okay. And so your final answer is going to be negative 8 and 12. Okay, so you can verify, yes, they add to 4, yes, they multiply to negative 96. Okay. All right. And then I do want to just show you this key as well, this little table set button. If you go to second table set, they're going to ask you where you want your table to start. So if you want to start it at a certain value, like 0, you could do that. And then remember, this means the change in the table. That will make it go up by 1s. That's what you should have as your default setting anyway. Okay, but just in case you need to use that, I wanted to show it to you. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to use the tables to determine the location of the zeros. So we're using tables to determine the locations of the zeros of each function, and then we have to state the consecutive integers between which the roots are located. I know that's a mouthful, so we're going to go through that together. So the location of the zeros just means we're going to be finding the x-intercepts. If something is consecutive, what does that mean? Like sometimes you'll hear a team has consecutive wins. Do we know what that means? In a row, right? Like back to back. Okay, so consecutive numbers are going to be numbers that are right next to each other. So when you are trying to find where the x-intercepts are, what is happening is with your x-intercept, you're going to have a sign change. So if you are looking at a graph, I just want to show you this. You don't have to write this down. Okay, if you are looking at your x-intercepts, okay, for this one, above the x-intercept will be a positive value, and below it would be a negative value. For this one, when you do the x-intercept, you have a negative, and then it would be a positive. Is that, are the values that change on the x's or the y's? Because your value up here, right? You'd have an x value that's negative and a y value that's positive. Okay, and then here you'd have an x value that's a negative and a y value that's negative. Okay, so it's the y that's going to change from a positive to a negative. So we are going to look for those changes in the y, okay, in your table. Okay, so you're going to look for changes in signs for the y values. Okay, because that means it's going to be crossing the axis. And it can either be from positive to negative or negative to positive, doesn't matter. Positive sign to a negative or a negative to a positive. Okay, so I want you to find those in your table. Okay, highlight them or circle them. Okay, so here we have 16 to negative 2. Okay, so it changes from a positive to a negative. Okay, and then where's the second one? Okay, so it says determine the x-intercept, so the integers between which the roots are located are going to be your x values. Okay, so what this means is it crosses the x-axis between I'm going to put BTW for between -7 and -5. Okay, and then for this one, it crosses between 1 and 3. Okay, so for your solution, when you are doing this on your own, all you have to say is between -7 and -5. Okay, those are consecutive on the table. And then between 1 and 3, those are consecutive on the table. Okay, so this is the only thing you have to write for your answer there. So on a question like this, you aren't going to have one to show if they give you the table. Okay, you're going to look at the table, but you can use these notes to help you understand why we're looking for those values. All right, and then for B, it says use a table to solve each equation. So we're going to have to make that. And if the exact roots can't be found, we are going to approximate the roots to the nearest hundredth. Okay. All right, so to do this, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to put this into our calculator. So in y1, -2x squared plus 3x plus 4. Oh, and if you want to insert something in front, you can go to second, and then above the delete key is INS, which means insert. So you could do -2 if you didn't want to type the x squared again. You could do plus 3x plus 4, and then we would just have to delete the 6 there. Okay, and then you're going to go to your table. Okay, and then we're going to look for y is equal to 0. Okay, so if you have y is equal to 0, that is going to be your intercept. Okay, if you don't have that on there, okay, then you are going to look for your sign changes. Sorry. No, there's no 0. Oh, I was like, why isn't that going? I have to be on my axis. All right, so I don't see a 0 either, but we do have some sign changes. So that's what we're going to do. If you can't find y equals to 0, look for the sign change. So from positive to negative or negative to positive. Okay, and then we are just going to write down where they are. So we're just going to make that part of the table visible. Okay. All right, I just see one sign change on my screen. Okay, and again, remember the sign change, is it for the x's or the y's? The y's. Okay, so one sign change would be from -1 to 0. At -1, you're at -1. At 0, you're at 4. Okay, so here's the sign change. Okay, did you guys find another one? Yep, for what x values? 2 and 3. Great. Okay, so what this tells you, okay, is you can see where they are between. Now this is telling us to use a table to solve the equation. So when you're solving, you have to find the exact x-intercept. Okay, for here, they told us that we could just say what it's between, but for this one, you have to find the actual one. So the sign change tells us that this 0 is going to be between -1 and 0, but we have to find that number. We know that this one is between 2 and 3, but we have to find that number. Okay, so if you are rounding to the nearest hundredth, do you guys know how to write 1/100th as a decimal? 0.01. Okay, so that is 1/100th. Okay, so that is going to be what we're going to adjust our table to. Okay, so I'm going to give you the keys that you need to press for that. So you're going to go to second, then you're going to hit the window key, because above it, it says TBL set, and that means we're trying to set up your table. Okay, when you do that, you are going to start at -1. Okay, and then the change in the table is going to be 0.01. And again, that's because it said that you're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So that's going to give that to you in hundredths. Okay, you guys are doing great. I know this is different and a lot, so I want you to make sure you have that written down. And then you can actually press those keys. So second window, okay, and then the first one is your table start. So we're going to change that to -1. Oh, do you guys know why I made it -1? Yeah, because that's what it's between. And then I'm going to do it again, but for this one. Okay, and then we're going to change this to 0.01. So second table. Okay, now we're rounding to the nearest hundredth, so it might not be exact. What you're going to do is you're going to find the y value closest to 0. Okay, and then once you do that, the x-coordinate, that is going to be your y-intercept. So the x-coordinate is your x-intercept. Okay, so you can scroll on your table. You can see the numbers are going down, right? They're getting closer and closer to 0. Okay, so we have a few here. This is 0.005. This is -0.05. So which one is going to be closer to 0? 0.005. Okay, so when y is 0.005, okay, your x value is -0.85, so that is going to be your answer. And we're going to use the approximation symbol because we can see it's not exactly 0, but it is approximately where your x-intercept is. Okay, now remember, you can have how many solutions? 2, and most of the time you do have 2. Okay, so the only time you only have 1 is if that's where the vertex is. All right, and we've already said we know the second one's between where? 2 and 3. So now we're going to find the second one. So we're going to start at 2, because it's between 2 and 3. So I'm going to go to second table set. I'm going to start at 2. Okay, so you're going to start at 2 to find that second x-intercept. Let's go to our table, so second table. Okay, and it's between 2 and 3. Okay, so we're looking for values that are close to 0. I can see they're going down. And so I just keep going until I find something that's close to 0. So it just so happens, again, that your y value is 0.005. They're not always going to be the same. Okay, so when y is 0.005, your x value is 2.35. Yep, so that's going to be your second value. All right, so that's how you can use your table to find those. All right, and then the last thing we're going to do today is an application. So when you take physics, you might see these again. When you're using this formula, h of t, this is equal to negative 16t squared. This is v sub 0 multiplied by t plus h sub 0. And it says where h of t is going to be the height of an object in feet. V sub 0 is the object's initial velocity in feet per second. And then that input value, that t, is the time in seconds. Okay, and then h sub 0 is the initial height in feet, okay, from which the object is launched. And we are going to round to the nearest tenth if we need to do some rounding. All right, so Juana throws a ball with an initial upward velocity of 18 feet per second. So that's going to be something I want to know. Okay, to her friend, but the friend misses the catch and the ball hits the ground. Juana releases the ball when her hand is 5 feet above the ground. We're going to use a graphing calculator to determine how long it will take the ball to hit the ground. So whenever a question asks you how long, that means you are going to be finding the time. Okay, so they gave you a couple of key values in the story problem. They said the initial upward velocity. Okay, so that is going to be your v sub 0. Okay, v sub 0 is the object's initial velocity. Okay, so that is 18 feet per second. Okay, and then it says her hand is about 5 feet above the ground, and that is going to be the initial height in feet from which the object is launched. So that's going to be your h sub 0. Okay, so we're going to take our equation and we are going to graph and find the x-intercept. Okay, so we have h of t is equal to negative 16t squared. I'm going to plug in 18 for v sub 0. I'm going to plug in 5 for h sub 0. Okay, and then you're going to plug this into your graphing calculator and find the x-intercept.
you can clear that out. Even though the input here is t, we are still just going to use our variable key, this x. So negative 16x squared plus 18x plus 5. Okay, now we're going to graph this. Go to Zoom. Let's go to our standard window. So Zoom 6 will give you your standard window. Oh, and that is actually enough to see the curve for this one. Okay, and then in order to find the zeros, I'm going to show you a function. Okay, so to find the x-intercept, you can use the zero function. Yep, there's a button that does that. Okay, so you don't have to look at your graph every time. Okay, you don't have to look at your table every time. Okay, so in order to do that, you are gonna do second, and you're gonna hit the trace button. And that takes you to the calculations, because above the trace it says calc. Okay, so we're going to hit second trace, and then the second option says 0. You can either scroll to it and press enter, or you can just do 2. Okay, and then you see it asks you a question here. It's going to ask you left bound. Yes, I will. Yep. Okay, so if you have your left bound, we're going to set that up. And then it's also going to ask you the right bound. And then it's going to ask you to guess. Okay, so it's a very similar to the intersection where it asks you like your first curve, your second curve, would you like to guess? And then you have your intersection. All right, so the left bound, this is what we're going to do, okay? We're going to go to the top. Let's go to our window. Let's just make the Y max so it's 20. So we just have some room there. So window, Y max, make it 20. And then let's go to the calc again. So the 0. So for the left bound, what you can do is you can go to the top, and if it asks you left bound, just go like 2 to the left. Press enter. You should see a little arrow on your calculator when you do this. Okay, you should see a little, it'll go like this. And then for the right bound, just go back to the top, go 2 to the right. And then what it's doing is you're telling your calculator, look in between these two and find, oh no, that's your maximum. I'm going to have to do it with the 0. Okay, so we can do that again for me. So, we go to second calc and go to second 0. So second, and then it's your trace button. Okay, and I'm sorry, I was doing your maximum. Okay, so you're going to go to as close as you can to your 0, which is your x-intercept. Okay, when you are telling it left bound, you have to go below the axis. Okay, and then press enter. It's going to give you that arrow. And then you have to go above the x-axis. And then what you are telling this is find the x-intercept that's in between those 2 arrows. And it will do it, but you can't just hit enter 3 times because I know some of you were doing that with your intersection. Okay, if you do it with this, it will give you an error. And then it will say what your 0 is. Okay, so left bound, you have to go to the left of the 0, press enter. Then you have to go on the right of the 0, press enter. For the guess, you can just press enter. You don't have to go anywhere special. And then it will tell you what your 0 is. Okay, so one of your zeros is going to be at x equals negative point, and this said to round to the nearest tenth. So if it's 0.23, it's just going to be negative 0.2. Okay, and then let's try the other one now. I want you to use that and see if you can do it. All right, so once you have your graph on there, again, you're going to go second and then press the trace button. You're finding the 0. So we found this x-intercept. Now we have to find the second one. Okay, and if you're doing that, then you are just going to use your arrow. I'm going to get as close to the x-intercept as I can. So why don't you do that with get as close as you can to that x-intercept. Okay, and then when it's asking you left bound, we're just going to click on the left arrow. We're going to press enter. Okay, for the right bound, go back to the center. Okay, click on the right, press enter. And then for the guess, you can press enter here, or if you want to go back to that where that is, you can. Okay, so the second one is going to be x equals 1 point, and then we're going to round that up to a 4. Okay, now this is asking us to how long will it take the ball to hit the ground. So for story problems, you're only going to have one answer. Which one of those answers can we reject? The negative, because you're not going to have a negative amount of time. Okay, so your answer for this is going to be 1.4 seconds. Okay, so time can't be negative. Okay, so then you are going to use your positive one. Okay, if you guys are having some trouble with being able to do that last example, I'll walk around and help you. And then if you are able to get it, you can start on your assignment.